the amount of heat that he's getting.
My DMs and my text message are relentless with the anger toward him right now.
Yeah. I mean, look at the stream too.
Yeah, I mean, it's people,
Chat.
and it's, I enjoy this part of football more than because listen, whether a guy's struggling or not, the Josh Norman thing we'll get in later, but like Jimmy, you can, I can't blame Jimmy anymore. Like they keep putting him out there. He is what he is. Sometimes players, I go back to the Dabo thing. The best part about football is it's truly on the football coach. He gets to dictate fucking everything. This is not the NBA. Players don't have any juice. If Kyle wants to cut someone, the guy's cut yesterday. If Kyle wants to play someone, he's playing every snap. And he's had a horrendous year. And I was on a text thread yesterday. One thing I think that's bothering people, and listen, this is something we talk about when you lose. His body language is really shitty. I mean, it really is bad. I feel like a lot of 49er fans I know feel like this guy hates being here right now.
You're talking about his body language on the field or his body language in press conferences or both?
I'm talking about his body language during games and his look. Just looks just bleh. It's like, can the guy just ever show any juice? And it doesn't bother me as much, though, I agree a little bit. Like, you have to, I think sometimes, like, Belichick and Andy Reid are examples, right? Their personality, they don't really yell that much during games. If anything, you don't really see, like, if you've watched the Chiefs this year and you've watched the Chiefs 2 years ago when they went 15-1, to me, Andy doesn't look any different.
Andy never changes really anything except for his post-game dance.
And listen, I don't pretend to be some Rhodes Scholar in studying leadership, but if you just pay attention enough to some Instagram channels and you watch football, I do think it's fair to say that the guys that are up and down on the sideline and just there's a negative kind of vibe with them, it does impact the team sometime. And there's just something, for whatever reason, it starts with Kyle. And his actions, his mindset, his body language, I do think it all plays a part. Now, there's the football aspect is killing them. Like, if he dialed better plays, if they didn't fumble, if they were more prepared, they would just be better regardless whether he smiled or had a frown. But it's just like, he looks like a miserable. This gets back to what we've been talking about. There is not a soul, that's going to, maybe Lynch could tell him, like, hey, bro, Now,
lighten up?
Yeah. Now, who he's been raised by, his dad, pretty miserable looking guy. John Gruden, not Mr. Happy. Like, those were kind of his football mentors, right? Worked for Gruden and his dad, like the two most successful guys, that Super Bowl champion coaches that probably taught him the nuts and bolts of coaching football. Kubiak is a good example, as a guy he spent a lot of time with, who does feel a little more of a positive guy, I'd say.
I'd say Dan Quinn is a little more Pete positive. Not quite Pete, but I'd say Dan Quinn's more positivity on the sideline guy.
Yeah, and I would say that Dan Quinn, if Kyle had to rank the coaches he worked for, it'd probably be lower on the list.
Yeah. I think,
You're
first
right.
of all,
Dan is a positive guy.
Body language is a huge deal. Like, I watched Kyler the other day, and I hated his body language on the sideline.
It was terrible. Yeah.
Is that guy a franchise leader? Well, as long as he's a great quarterback, then he'll be treated as such. But I don't know. Wouldn't shock me if there were some people in the locker room that were like, fuck yeah, Colt McCoy. Which, by the way, somebody who knows Colt McCoy reached out to me after our last podcast and said one of the underrated things about Colt McCoy is the guy loves football at an elite level. He just loves football. And it's part of what makes him, he works his ass off because he loves football, and he squeezes every ounce of juice out of that orange. So,
I feel like we both, and I know I'm way guilty on this, I don't know much about him. I really don't. And I just wrote him off because he's a 35-year-old backup that doesn't play that much. And then I watched him like, I kind of like this guy.
Well, I was texting my buddy who knows Colt, and I'm like, I after the game, I said, I'm just kind of sitting here. I really do appreciate for Colt McCoy what that was like. Because most guys at 35 years old who've been around the league for a while and been backups and have not been on great teams, you think about some of the teams he's been on, don't keep at it and don't get that opportunity and then don't look like that when they get their shot. And so I did just kind of sit back afterwards and go like, that's pretty cool to see what Colt McCoy did. And I said to him, were you surprised? He said, I was not surprised that Colt played like that because I know how hard he works and I know how much he loves football.
Yeah, I
So
would not be shocked if Josh
his other
Johnson
thing was, I
and Colt
think Colt
McCoy
is,
are high school coaches.
yeah. His other thing was, I think Colt's underrated athletically. Like, he's more talented than people realize. And he
I'd
did
agree
good.
watching him. He's a good athlete.
Anyway, I think what I see in Kyle's body language is disbelief. I don't think he can. I think he still hasn't come to terms with the fact that his team's in this position. And he even said it after the game. I thought we'd look good. We had a good week of practice. I thought we'd look good. I think he's having a very difficult time accepting that this is the situation that they're in.
Isn't that on
And
him though to pivot when it's not
oh
when the
yeah, there's
situation
no
presents
question.
itself?
But yeah, of course. But I think he thought he had the answers last week. He thought we have the answer. We practice well. We're about to bounce back. And honestly, if they don't have those 2 fumbles, I think they might win that game. But they had the 2 fumbles, and whatever. It's just, I think he was probably right. And then the game went wrong, and their defense, they cannot handle things not going right. And when I say that, I don't mean emotionally. I just mean they don't have enough to overcome it. Their quarterback can't overcome it because he's not good enough. Their defense can't overcome it because they're not taking the ball away. They cannot overcome being imperfect unless they're playing like the Bears. Well, the Cardinals were slicing and dicing and had it going on. And the Niners were imperfect. And like we were talking about Fields the other night on Monday Night Football, he overcame now they still lost the game, but the Niners just are not able to overcome their imperfections right now. And I think it comes back. I think a lot of it comes back to Jimmy's limitations, but they did not lose that game because of Jimmy. They lost that game because they put themselves behind the 8 ball. And if they're playing a team that's going to keep scoring, they just can't overcome it. When did the Bears game change? When the Bears turned the football over, right?
Yeah.
And then Khalil Herbert went out. The Cardinals clearly are a better football team than the Bears, and the Niners just can't overcome that. I think Kyle is struggling with that. And that goes back to your point. Like, that goes back to another coach on the staff who can have some other solutions for him. Maybe that's defensively. Maybe Trey Lance is part of a solution and he's not willing to go there. And that's a problem. But
well, I think part of being a head coach, a leader in anything, I'd say, but definitely a head coach when you have a bunch of younger people, even in the pros, you have, I bet the average age on an NFL roster is like 26, 27 years old. So the overwhelming majority of people are not even parents and they're under 30. So when they're looking, and this is what I always thought was hard because I couldn't fake it when I worked for a team. Now, no one looked at me for guidance or anything, so it didn't matter. But I was always amazed that coaches could be kind of like fake optimists because you have to be. And I think Kyle's not very good at that. I think it's a huge struggle for him. He's actually more like normal people.
I think he's a glass half empty guy.
Well, yeah, and his body language is like reflective of like what every fan's thinking. I don't think you can be like that. And I think he's going to have to do some introspection. Now, it's hard, at 41 years old I'm just going to throw out even $50 million already made in his career. Fuck, probably more than that. But whatever. He doesn't need the money. He's already super famous. Now, he's never won a Super Bowl as a head coach, but like it's hard to change once you've accomplished a lot and have a lot of juice. And there's not like I say this name, but it's like this guy's proven he struggles to hire coaches. John Mara, but just an older guy. Hell, a Stan Kroenke, a guy that just, hey man, I've been in business for 30 years and I fucking made billions of dollars. Let's just sit and talk life. Paul Allen, whatever, and just have a conversation. Like I wouldn't blame Kyle for not looking. I know he probably likes him as who knows, but he doesn't look at Jed like an equal, even though in some weird way they've both. We're kind of born into a family, but Kyle definitely had to earn his stripes more. Like Mike Shanahan couldn't hold his hand with the Houston Texans or the Atlanta Falcons. Like ultimately Jed, like he's made some good investments, but it's like, is he really making the investments? Or like Parag and some of his money guys? Now you get credit for hiring those guys, but like their ownership, and this is where I keep going back to, because I see this a lot, right? You see it in the chat, you see it in our Twitter mentions, you see it talking to people. Fucking Kyle. Should we fucking fire Kyle? And let Jed York conduct an interview process? And again, he's not going to get fired unless something insane happens. It would be one of the biggest stories in the NFL. But he's not. But if he did, in what world do you think, like, Jed will figure it out? We've experienced that before. He got lucky to land Kyle and John. He wanted Josh. Josh told him no. And who knows? That would have been probably a disaster.
Well, in all
you think
likelihood,
Josh McDaniels would have been a lock to make it to the Super Bowl in 4 years? No chance.
Well, you'd end up in the same spot with probably an all-powerful head coach, because that's what you have to give that's what he had to give Kyle when they were in that circumstance, and that's what he'd probably have to give the next guy, right? Because they don't have a GM. They don't currently have a GM that is above the head coach. And so listen, generally, that's how it works.
I agree. And in fairness to Jed, the overwhelming majority of owners, it feels like, are lost when they're searching for head coaches, right? They don't know what they're doing. They miss all the time, whether they're self-made billionaires or guys, that have been handed the team from their family. It is very, very difficult, right? That to me is my overarching theme, that like, if Kyle fails here in the next couple of years and this trajectory stays the same and it just gets really ugly and Trey Lance is a disaster, there's under a 50% chance that the next coach would be an upgrade. He might be the quote-unquote sexier name at the time, but it would more than likely lead to what it's been under the York leadership. Losing.
Yeah, well, but they're not there yet.
They're not even close. But that conversation, if they go 6-11,
if you take out the Super Bowl year,
which to me is pretty crazy to keep using that. Like, you subtract the Super Bowl year, well, yeah. If you fucking subtract 2 years ago from Andy Reid, he wouldn't have a Super Bowl championship. Like, everything counts.
Yes, but Andy Reid has a much longer resume of competing for championships, right?
Or just going to the playoffs. That's what
the next few years are about, right? Because we can look back and go, yeah, I mean, Ken Wisenhunt went to a Super Bowl, but, right? Yeah, Jim Caldwell went to a Super Bowl, but.
Kyle's in that category right now. Because like Mike Vrabel, for example.
Unlike those guys,
Mike Vrabel's never made a Super Bowl. And more than likely he won't even this year. But you know what he's going to do? For 3 straight years? Playoffs. And for back-to-back years, host the playoff game. It's like, that's all. Do you know what all owners want? Like, ideally, you'd get Belichick and Brady and you'd go to 9 Super Bowls. Basically, every single other person can you just like host playoff games like every other year and go to the playoffs every year, even if you're on the road? Like, what? Do you think Mike Tomlin, for as shitty as last year was, they got a home playoff game? They won the division. You think that sucked for them? I'll promise you, no, it didn't. You know what they're going to do again this year? Make the playoffs. Do you know how many times Mike Tomlin's made the playoffs? It's like, well, he's only won the 1 Super Bowl. Yeah, he fucking makes the playoffs every freaking year. And the one year where they ended up playing with a quarterback named Duck, they went 8-8.
Never been under 500.
You know what Kyle would have done for 8-8 this year? I mean, guy, what's he headed toward right now? It feels like 6-11. That's what it feels like they're headed toward.
Yeah, well, Trey Lance playing is going to be a big part of how that looks, but right now,
even if it looks bright and there's a lot like the Fields thing, like it's a bright moment for Fields the last 2 weeks. They have lost both games. Like he could have a bunch of games.
But again, that's part of what it would, at least I think for some people, be an indication of.
I agree, but the record will still be shitty.
Again, Kyle's not getting fired. So how do you get out of this right now? He's got to fix it. He has to fix it.
Well, yeah, as John Baxter used to say, when you find yourself in a hole, what do? You drop the shovel. And it does feel like, and this is where I think fans look at him, it's like he's playing into this with like his weird vibes and his coaching, and it's just, now there were moments, and I'm sure you get this, like, he didn't fumble the ball. George did. Brandon did. Yes, we know. Just like Mike Tomlin didn't fumble the fucking punt that led to points, right?
Yeah, I mean, but he built this team that wasn't able to overcome those fumbles. That's, to me, the bottom line. Yeah, he built the team that couldn't overcome those fumbles.
And really, it wasn't close. I mean, they got, as the kids say, dog walked.
I loved. Was it this year or 2 years ago? The interview he did with Rich Eisen. I've tweeted it out before, where he talked about like how he looks at a house with his wife, and he'll talk about all the things he hates, and his wife will be almost in tears, and she'll say, "Why do you hate this house?" And he'll say, "Oh, I don't hate this house. I like this house. That's how I process things." I think that spoke to me, because that's sometimes how I think. And I have to be cognizant of, no, let's look at this thing from a glass half full standpoint, because that's going to give you a better chance to succeed. And I think that's an insight into Kyle. Well, I don't think Kyle thinks, in some ways he's negative. I think he's very comfortable in the negativity that is the NFL. I think he's comfortable with the criticism. I think he's comfortable with the failure. I think he knows how to he knows how to work through those. But you have to you got to bring other people with you in those circumstances, right?
Well, you're the captain of the ship.
Because you're the captain.